In 1985, Nintendo saved the video game industry, quite frankly, and from probably dying and becoming a side note in history. But Nintendo was no new startup from Japan like other video game companies that were founded in like the 70s or 80s. In fact, at this point, Nintendo was nearly 100 years old. In this episode of Video Game History, we go about Nintendo's history and the development of the NES. Have fun! Nintendo was founded on the 23rd of September in 1889 by Fusajiro Yamauchi, and back then they would be known as Nintendo Kopai. And you might have seen pictures like these, which were the original Nintendo headquarters. But the first video games wouldn't exist for 60 years or so, and video games' first commercial success would take nearly 80 years. So what did Nintendo do during that time? Well, Nintendo would distribute Japanese playing cards, mostly known were the Hanafuda cards. Now, Hanafuda cards became popular after Japan banned gambling in 1882, and they were popular in gaming parlors run by the Yakuza in 1882. So if you're watching, Kazuma, I hope you have fun, I guess. Even though Nintendo was seeing early success, they still faced financial struggles due to multiple factors, partly due to the expensive manufacturing process, high product prices, and the long durability of the cards, which in turn impacted sales. But then in 1902, Nintendo themselves started selling Western-style cards, so poker cards and stuff. In 1904, the Russo-Japanese War breaks out, and it hits the leisure sector quite hard, including Nintendo due to new levies such as the Karuta Zai, a tax on playing cards. In response to that, and in 1907, Nintendo entered an agreement with Nihon Senbai, which would later be known as Japan Tobacco, to sell its cards to various cigarette stores. To 1929, 40 years after Nintendo was founded, Nintendo was the biggest playing card business in Japan, and its first president stepped down and was succeeded by Sekiro Kaneda. Because of Sekiro's marriage with Yamauchi's daughter not producing any male heirs, he decided to quickly adopt his son-in-law, who was an artist for the company, but Inaba would leave the company, so he made his grandson, born a couple years earlier in 1927, his successor, and this would prove to be more than a good decision. On the 17th of December 1941, the Japanese Navy conducts a surprise attack against the US in Pearl Harbor and drags the US into World War II and subsequent with Japan and the Pacific. During World War II, Nintendo struggled heavily due to 1. The Japanese authorities prohibiting the spreading of foreign card games, and 2nd, the priorities of Japanese society shifting and its interest in recreational activities were dwindling. Nintendo began to struggle and survive partly due to a financial injection by Hiroshi Yamauchi's wife, Michiko Inaba, who came from a wealthy family. In 1950, Sekiro Kaneda's health deteriorated and he was succeeded by Hiroshi Yamauchi, and his reign as president would be enormous. In 1953, Nintendo would become the first company in Japan to mass-produce plastic cards, and in 1959, Nintendo would enter a partnership with Disney to produce Disney-themed cards. Over the 60s, Nintendo would open a Tokyo branch, and they sold over 1.5 million card packs, and in 1970, Nintendo would develop and release its first electronic toy, the beam gun, which would be sold over 1 million times. As a result, Nintendo would partner with Magnavox to develop a light gun for the Magnavox Odyssey inspired by the beam gun, which would also be Nintendo's first tapping into video games. During the 70s, Nintendo would grow and grow and grow. In 1974, Nintendo would release its very first arcade game, Wild Gunman, in Japan, produced by Shigeru Miyamoto. In the same year, Nintendo would also acquire the distribution rights for the Magnavox Odyssey. Nintendo developed multiple arcades as well. In 1979, Nintendo opened its first headquarters in New York City. A year later, Nintendo would release the Game & Watch, which would sell over 43.4 million units worldwide. And in 1981, Nintendo would release a Donkey Kong. In the early 80s, Nintendo planned to develop a cartridge-based console called the Family Computer, or Famicom as it was known in Japan. The design of the system was led by Masayuki Oemura, and originally they planned making the Famicom a 16-bit system with a keyboard and floppy disk, but Hiroshi Yamauchi rejected this plan because he believed a simpler system would be better for people that aren't into tech themselves. The biggest outside influence was the ColecoVision, which Donkey Kong was one of the top sellers for. Takao Sawano, the project chief for the Famicom, was impressed by the ColecoVisions. Nintendo's aim was to surpass the ColecoVision in terms of graphics capabilities and match the arcade version of Donkey Kong. So they took a Donkey Kong arcade machine and brought it to Ricoh, a chip manufacturer, for analysis. And this led to the development of the picture processing unit for the NES. The controller were reused designs for the Game & Watch, and originally the team wanted to use joysticks, but there were concerns about the durability and that children might step on it. In 1983, the Famicom was released in Japan, 14,800 yen, which in the same year Nintendo actually wanted to partner with Atari to get the Famicom launched in North America. In the same year, Nintendo actually wanted to partner with Atari to get the Famicom launched in North America, and the deal was set to be signed in the Consumer Electronics Show of 1983, but it ultimately was delayed due to Atari discovering that at the very show, Coleco was illegally displaying the Coleco Adam computer with Donkey Kong on it. Ray Kassar, Atari CEO, was fired the next month, so the deal ultimately never happened. Later that year, the industry would collapse, and if you want to know more about this, I made a whole video about the video game crash of 1983. You can watch it here or in the end card below, in the end card after this video. By 1985, Nintendo had sold over 2.5 million units of the Famicom in Japan alone, and announced plans to launch its system in North America. The American press was skeptical of the success such a system could have, because the industry was still trying to recover, and they thought a release in America would be a huge mistake on Nintendo's part. In June of 1985, Nintendo presented the American version of the Famicom. The Nintendo Entertainment System was launched in test markets in New York City in 1985 first, and in Los Angeles in 1986, and launching the console completely in September that year. And the console would be a success, selling 60 million units worldwide, and the industry ultimately healing from the crash. But remember, one of the big main reasons and to why the Nintendo video game crash happened, well, one of the reasons for the crash were an overabundance of bad third-party games. And Nintendo learned from this and established a Nintendo seal of quality, which was first used in the US to ensure every game for the Nintendo Entertainment System was a game worth playing, and every single game in fact needed manual approval by Hiroshi Yamauchi himself. The history behind Nintendo and the Nintendo Entertainment System is one with a long history. It's a story of how Nintendo went from a family-owned playing card manufacturer to one of the biggest video game companies in the world, and ultimately the savior of the industry. This is it, guys. This is the second video in the video game history series. I hope you had fun. On the right to me, you can watch the video game history video. On the left to me, you can watch the last video that I made, the Switch 2 video, and I see you soon. I don't know what video will be coming on Saturday yet. Probably will be something spontaneous, but on Sunday, another This Week in Gaming video. I'll see you until then. Bye bye.